Hello, what's
Hi.
up, everybody? Um, this is kind of weird. This is the first time I've ever streamed something with someone else, and so Lindsay and I are here live, and the rest of you are on like a 15-second delay. And so Lindsay is watching the streams and the comments, and I am watching none of it. And we hope this is working and going okay. So feel free to leave us a comment if it's not, and Lindsay will tell me, and then I will frantically try to fix it. But for now, I think we're good. So,
Hi, Emilio.
so everybody, I think if you're watching this, you probably have an idea of who we are. But if not, I'm Tony Hoffer, a photographer in Philadelphia. My wife Amy and I own Hoffer Photography, and Lindsay Banneker works for us. She's our studio manager. Would you like to say hi to the people?
Hi, people.
Um, like everyone else, we are at home, although we always work from home. So, in some ways, it doesn't feel very different, and in some ways, it feels completely different. Um, but yeah, so here we are. We're going to try to make this work and make this fun. Amy and Lindsay bet that I couldn't do this in under an hour, but I'm going to try my best.
Under an
So
hour? You said under half an hour.
either way, so we're gonna try our best. So whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, welcome. If this works on both, it will be a miracle, and I think it is so far. So we're trying our best.
It looks like it's good so far in the chat.
Okay,
So
cool. Um, so we're gonna kind of jump into a few things here. Um, and basically, what we're going to do is I'm going to kind of share my screen, and we're going to go through our process for workflow, and then we're going to edit some photos, show you how we do that, how we try to do it as quickly as possible and efficiently. And then we also had a bunch of people that sent us photos I had asked for, so we had a ton of people send stuff, so thank you for that. I picked a bunch of photos of the ones that were sent in, and I thought we could kind of talk about a few things as we edit. So we'll do some workflow chat, and then we'll do some editing. And if you have questions or thoughts, feel free to share them. As we have said, this is totally free. We are asking of nothing from you. We are not asking for your email or your info or anything like that. We are doing this for two reasons. One is because about a decade ago, some of you may remember that I did a workflow DVD with my friend Spencer. If you've been following us that long, thank you. We appreciate it. That's a long time. You may recognize the name Spencer because he went on to create Magmod. Ever heard of it? And meanwhile, I went on to create photos. That's about it. So anyway, we made this workflow DVD probably about 10 years ago now, and it went over really well. We sold a lot of them, and DVDs aren't really a thing anymore. So even though we have a couple stacked up in our basement, it's not really a thing someone could watch. And I think I was using Lightroom 2, so a little outdated. But a lot of people had requested we kind of do an update to that and talk about our workflow now and how it's different. But the bottom line is our workflow isn't really that different now. We were honestly pretty proud of what we set up back then, and it's still very similar, but there have been some tweaks over time. And among those tweaks, one of them was in the midst of all this stuff, as many of us are, we're at home, we're trying to do our best to improve our businesses. And so one of the things we did was decided to create and sell some presets. And as we did it, we kind of discovered this way that we could kind of rig up some stuff and make our workflow even faster. And so we wanted to kind of show off some of that stuff, but also just go through our full workflow. So that's what we're here to do, and we hope you enjoy it. And Lindsay, would you like to add anything, or maybe tell them what you do?
Tell them what I do.
Sure.
Well, I make sure the workflow is going according to plan, pretty much. I help build it, I guess, a little bit, and I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah, so Lindsay works for us full time. She's our studio manager. We have two associate photographers as well as Amy and I, and so Lindsay basically gets the whole show running. So while I kind of created the workflow part, I guess, a long time ago, when Lindsay came on board, I guess a little over 5 years ago, full time, we kind of rethought everything and said, is this what we really want to be doing? Are there any things we can do? And so we've kind of recreated that, and Lindsay keeps us on task and on track. She does a ton of our editing. She does some culling. She kind of does a lot of behind the scenes stuff. So we thought we'd tackle this together because there's some things that she will give better info than I will about. And so with that said, we will dive into workflow. Oh, I mentioned all the preset stuff. The website is there at the bottom if you feel like checking it out. That is the only sales pitch part of this. Other than that, we're just kind of using our time to do something here. So cool. We are going to jump in. Lindsay will let me know if any of you ask fun or interesting questions. And if you don't, that's fine. We will just listen to ourselves talk for a while. So, okay. So workflow, before we kind of show like the nitty gritty stuff, what I want to mention to all of you is we take workflow very seriously. Did you drop something? We take our workflow very seriously. We shoot hundreds of thousands of photos every year. And so getting through them and delivering them in a timely fashion is very important to us. But one thing we realized a long time ago is that if we can save a second on a photo, multiply that times tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of seconds, and that can save us weeks of time. And that when we're busy, when we're in the midst of busy season, when our team has 5 or 6 weddings in a weekend, and Lindsay's seeing the back end of all that stuff, that becomes really important. And Lindsay's kind of a beast. She keeps us on track, like I said, and yeah. And I don't think we've delivered a wedding in what's the 3 weeks has probably been the longest it's taken.
3 weeks is definitely like the longest, and that's like when I'm like kind of pushing myself to the limit. But I have like a personal goal of 2.5 week delivery.
Yeah. So we've always taken it very seriously, and part of our business is people sort of understanding that and appreciating that and expecting it too. So it's something we really care about, and because of that, we need to have a system in place because we do a lot of stuff every year, and we want to make sure it's all set. So I'm going to show you my desktop a little bit here, as you can already see. And on the left, you can see I clicked on something that is called Working Files. So the way I organize things is I have a folder called Working Files. This gets backed up every day, or every time my computer's on, basically. And in there, we have folders of everything I'm kind of currently working on. And then you can see on the left, it's kind of hidden by our faces there, but you can see on the left, we also have a hard drive that we do for every year. So if I click on, I knew that would happen. I'm clicking on the screen. If I click on like 2019, for example, you can see we have everything we did in 2019. We have the same for 2020, and we have a backup drive that gets backed up every night. And so kind of that's how we organize our files. Now everything within them gets a date and then the name of the people we're doing. So, for example, on 2019, April 18th, we shot for Arcadia University. So it's labeled and dated that way. That way, every photo we've ever taken is archived in a date order. And so that becomes really important over the years. We've been shooting for almost 13 years now. And so, we have more often than we wish, we have clients reaching out and saying, hey, lost my photos, can you help me? That kind of thing. And so having that organization in place really helps us. Lindsay's not going to talk very much. We're trying to...
Sorry, yeah, no, we do. I've actually been archiving weddings back from 2010. So I'm very aware that our system is like really, really good and organized. And
yeah. And if any of you are watching and watched that workflow DVD from a decade ago, you'll find that it is the exact same labeling system. So I'm just going to click on one of these. So inside these folders, that's where we put stuff. So we'll put like a 1 stars folder. We'll go over this in a second, but 1 stars, 3 stars, etc. So we have one master folder for each client, and then in there we kind of divide it out based on what we're using it for. So that's kind of our organization structure. And like I said, we have backup drives that are backing up every night. And yeah, so that kind of keeps us in order. All right, we're going to jump into photo mechanic here. If none of you, or none of you, if any of you use photo mechanic for culling, you probably know that photo mechanic is great. It's really fast, and as Lightroom has improved, it's gotten better, but it still doesn't approach the speed that photo mechanic gives. And so I know a lot of people are hesitant to have a second program just for culling, but again, saving seconds matters a lot to us. And so for us, photo mechanic's really important because it probably saves us, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 minutes per wedding, if I had to guess. And that really adds up over the course of a year. So would you agree, Linz? 20, 30 minutes maybe?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's much easier, and I've like tried other ways of doing it, but photo mechanic has always just been much easier to use, and then it's so much easier to just drag in your files to Lightroom and everything. So
Yeah. So on the left in Photo Mechanic here, you can kind of select. You can see I have that working drive or working files folder saved as a favorite. So I just pulled some old ones in here since we're not really shooting right now. We just have some old sessions that we're going to look at. But with Photo Mechanic, you can blow the photos up big and watch how fast it just goes through every photo. There's no loading time like Lightroom. It's just like almost instant in going through these photos. And so rating them can be really, really quick. Um, and so basically what we do is we set Photo Mechanic up so that when we push a number, it rates the photos. And so, oh, and also when we push the number, it auto advances to the next photo. So if I'm looking here, I can give the photo a number. I can push a 2. And you see in the top left there, it added a 2-star to the photo. And literally, I can just go through, hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever I want, and it'll just add the number rating to them. So that's exactly how we work is just give it a 2, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 2, a 1, whatever. For us, we use a 1-star as like we're not going to deliver this photo because maybe something was wrong with it, maybe it's a duplicate, maybe the people don't look their best. So that would be a 1-star. A 2-star is a photo that we are going to deliver, and I think one of the things that has always been important in our workflow is we do 3 and 4 stars as well. So we're not, when we're culling through photos, we're not just doing keeping and getting rid of. We're also doing a 3-star, which means that we are potentially going to blog this photo or put it on social media. So right from the get-go, as we're culling photos, we're kind of making those decisions. Now, a lot of people over the years have said, well, how do you know how a photo is going to look, if you haven't edited it yet? And our answer is, well, shoot it better and you'll know. Like we rarely use editing to save a photo. So I would say 99% of the time we can tell if it's a winner when we're culling through it. So we'll kind of go through that as we go. But yeah, so I'm not actually looking at these. I'm just giving random numbers so you can see how it works. But 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So we just rated some of these photos from this session here. And now you can see when I go back into kind of this grid mode in Photo Mechanic, it has all the numbers associated with them. Wow, that was a Philly accent there, associated. And so you can delete and look at like only the 1-star images if you want, or only the 2-star images. And so the way we do it is we'll take the 1-star images, we'll select them, and like I said earlier, we have a subfolder for 1-stars. And so right away, we'll throw these images we're not delivering into our 1-stars folder. In the same way, we'll do the same with 3 stars. I had mentioned 4 stars as well. 4 stars for us it's kind of like a catch-all. If it's like a behind-the-scenes photo of us that we want to keep, if it's like a photo that we need to Photoshop out, a light stand, or like we know it needs a little extra work, it's kind of like our, hey, alert, this has 4 stars. You need to pay a little extra attention to this one kind of thing. So Sorry, I'm talking a lot, Linz. Just jump in if you
No, no,
want.
you're good. I agree with everything you're saying.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I just wanted to say that when we put the 1 stars into the 1 star folder, it makes it easier just to get them out of the way. They don't come into Lightroom with everything else, so you don't have to worry about going through and kind of like culling again as you go through them in Lightroom.
yeah, that's really important, and it keeps Lightroom working faster because we don't have nearly as many photos in there. And we'll show you how our Lightroom catalog setup works too. But um, yeah, so then what we do after we're done is we'll save these 3 stars into this 3 star folder. And if you're curious, if you can see on the left, the 3 star folder also has a date. That is because when we bring that into Lightroom, we don't want it to just say 3 stars because we use one big catalog, as we'll show you. And so we don't want all our folders from the whole year to just be called 3 stars. We want them to be categorized as well. So we'll drag these in here. So that's pretty much it. Right, we're using Photo Mechanic basically just to separate the, what is it, the wheat from the chaff? Am I saying that right? Separate the good from the bad. I don't even have my margarita yet for a Cinco de Mayo. I thought that would make you laugh. Leave a comment and tell me if wheat from chaff is correct.
So far, no comment.
Separate the mice from the men. So anyway, so we put the 1 stars, 3 stars, etc. So that's literally the only stuff we do in Photo Mechanic. It's real quick, in and out. We call through the session and get on to Lightroom. So yeah, let us know if you have any questions about Photo Mechanic, but I'll jump into Lightroom here. So in Lightroom, what you can see just above our faces here on the screen share is you can see these folders have dates. So this one's from 2018, has 2018, the date, the name, and then it says 3 stars. So what we do is every year we create a Lightroom catalog that is literally the entire year. So in that catalog, it has all of our 3 star photos from the year. And the reason we do that is because, one, we're not putting the full wedding or the full session in there. It's only our 3 stars. And two, at the end of the year or whenever we feel like updating our portfolio, we can go just in that one catalog and look through all of our favorite images from the year. So it makes it a lot easier. And because Lindsay does our editing, and usually I, Jim, Chris, whoever's doing the shooting, is going to edit their favorite photos. That's kind of why we're dragging these 3 stars in here. So, Lindsay, I thought you wanted to say something about that, but I could be wrong.
About bringing 3 stars?
Yeah.
No, just that we start with those first, and
yeah.
Yeah.
We've always found that we're the most excited to edit the photos that really excite us from each session, each wedding, and so that's usually the first thing we do. And the other thing we found is that there's typically one photo from kind of every setting or every setup in a wedding or a session that we really like. And so if we edit that, then when we go back through later and we're editing all the rest, we can kind of base our edits off that first one. And so it really speeds up the process by just editing our favorites first. It makes us more excited to do it from the get-go, then it also speeds it up along the way. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drag a wedding in. So I just grabbed this one wedding. I'm going to kind of slide it into Lightroom here. And so when we bring our photos into Lightroom, these are just a couple favorites from a wedding. I'm sure all of you are familiar with this, but you have some options here. One of them is to put a preset on. And so probably the biggest workflow time-saving thing that we've ever done is, for as long as I can remember, we've applied a preset to all of our photos when we import them. Now, we've worked really hard on these presets over the years, and that's why we've started selling them, because we think they're awesome. But that alone will not only speed up your work tremendously, because it's doing a lot of the work behind the scenes, but it will also give you a consistent brand, a consistent look across all your images. So it's really important for us to do that. So you can see I have what we call the Hofshot Pro presets. They're all loaded here. I was just going to pick Portland for this one because it kind of suits. When we made the presets, we named them all after different cities that kind of represented the looks that we thought they gave. So I'm going to show you a few different ones as we go. But so anyway, on the left, you can see how all these dates are still in here in Lightroom. And so what we do from a workflow perspective, go through, edit the photos, and then if we right click here, there's an option to export this export this folder as a catalog. So like I said, we only have the 3 stars in our main catalog. This is our 2020 catalog, let's say. Then we hit export this folder as a catalog, and we can save just the folder of, Brittany and DJ here. We can save that as its own catalog. From there, we can import all the other photos from their session, edit it, put it out. So when people ask us, do we have a catalog for each client, or do we have a catalog for all of our clients? The answer is yes to both. Lindsay, I keep thinking you're going to talk. I get excited.
No, sorry. No, I was just laughing at Jason Fazan says, please whistle the workflow song.
That's a deep cut there, Jason. Nice. Okay. Lindsay, are there any other workflow tips that we want to add before we start editing?
No, I mean, once you bring the 2 stars in and everything, I will say that I start by, when I edit Tony and Amy's work, or Jim with his second shooter, or Chris with his second shooter, I will edit each photographer's work first. So I'll only do like Jim's first, and then his second shooter. I'll only do yours first, and then Amy's, because it's just, obviously it's more consistent and it's not chopped up if you guys are getting the same moment. It's just so much easier to edit your photos, one photographer's photos at one time. So
yeah, and if people don't know how to do that, you can just click on attribute up here. Metadata, wrong thing. And it will give you your cameras, but like Amy and I use the same cameras. So at this time we were both using the Nikon D850s. But you can click on this and click camera serial number, and that will break them up between the 2 cameras. So
yeah, and before I get started, I make sure that both cameras are synced properly.
Yeah,
for each person.
Also, special.
Which we had some trouble with in our group.
We're good at some things, but syncing cameras, not our strong suit.
Maybe the worst.
No. That is more chaff than wheat, would you say?
Yeah, I would say that.
All right, so
I have a question.
What's that?
I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you choose a preset to apply ahead of time? They all seem very different. Even the same preset on the same event changes a lot from what I've noticed.
Oh, good question. So for us, to be honest, we have one preset. So we find it important for us to have a preset that we use and like, and that works across our images. And so as we get into the editing here, we'll kind of show you the easiest, fastest way to tweak those. But like for us, we tend to choose a look that we like and kind of keep that for everything. Now, with that said, if we're shooting studio work, actually this couple that you're looking at here, when they got married, Brittany got ready inside a photo studio. Like that's where she chose to get ready, which was cool. But like shooting in a studio, our preset isn't always amazing at, because it's built for like natural everyday stuff. But with the way we do it with the sliders, you can kind of dial it up and down. So in the pro presets, I'm not going to tell you which one, because it's up to you to find the look you like. But one of them is the one we use for all of our photos. And but the way we built them is that if you want to shoot it like a beach or something, that the looks, this one's called San Diego that I used on all these. So the looks would apply well in certain situations, but it's very easy to kind of dial them up and down. So hopefully I answered that well.
And then just one more question.
Yeah.
So when do you bring in the 2 stars, and where do you file them?
Okay, so let me jump back in here real quick. So we had mentioned that we have different folders, so 1 star, 3 stars. We also have a RAWs folder, which when we import our photos, like from our memory cards, we just put them in this RAWs folder, and the 2 stars just stay there. We could rename it 2 stars if we want, but basically we filter out the 1s, we filter out the 3s, and then we just keep them there. As far as when we bring them in, like I said, we'll right click on a folder once we're done editing these 3 stars. Right click it, export this folder as a catalog, and then we'll name it with their last name and save it wherever we want. And once we have that new catalog up and running, that's when we would bring in the 2 stars. And so all the edits from our 3 stars will still save and be good to go, but the 2 stars will come in and then we can kind of take it from there. So, all right, so let's kind of slide a little bit from workflow into editing. I know the workflow seems very simple, but it's built to be that way because we want it to be repeatable and the same whenever we do it. So anyway, okay, so I just brought in that wedding, and I also have this session, and I did a different preset for each one. So on this session of Brittany and DJ, we did our preset called San Diego. So you can see that up here in the top right. On the left, we have all our different pro presets. So if you scroll over them, you can see the different looks it makes. The DC one looks pretty nice in this photo. Some brighter, some darker, some kind of all over the place. But San Diego is kind of beachy, and we like it. So I'm just going to kind of dive in. I'm going to edit a few photos and show you kind of not only how we try to do it as quickly as possible, but how some of our tips and tricks for making the images really pop and shine. So cool. So I guess first things first, our goal when we're editing is to click as few times as possible. I can't repeat that enough. Every time we click, it takes a second. And every second we can save over the course of the year or even over the course of one wedding makes a huge difference. Sorry, haven't had enough water. It's huge. And so our goal is limiting clicks. And so when we build our presets, we did it so that we didn't have to click around with highlights and shadows and whites and blacks and all that stuff. All we did was we distilled it down to one slider. So if you see in the top right, we have this San Diego preset, and I can slide it down. And if I put it at 0, that's the original raw photo. And if I put it up to 200, it's ridiculous. Right at 100 is kind of the home base for the preset. And so from there, I can slide it, to wherever I like it, depending on how much of an effect I want it to have. So for this photo, I thought it looked pretty good. I might just dial it back a little bit. So, right there, we've done literally no editing. We've brought it in with a preset. We've slid one slider down a little bit, and it looks pretty good. This is on auto white balance. I will say that if there are sliders we touch, we'll do whatever it takes to make the photo look good. But if there are sliders we touch, they're usually located kind of right in this top area. So we find ourselves mostly doing white balance and exposure. I would say that, I don't know, Linz, what percentage of our editing do you think is done between the preset, white balance, and exposure?
I mean, like most, 90-something%. I mean, when we're like in the middle of building a preset, we focus on the things that are like lower down, because if you find yourself changing those too much, you know that you need to be changing the preset. Yeah. Like that's how you get a good preset. Like is you're working on making sure that you don't always have to like make the highlights go down or make the shadows go up or anything like that. So we keep most of our editing up in the top there of that slide.
Yeah, and then, like you said, if our mouse and our eyes have to start hunting over here on the right for all these different settings, then we get ourselves into a delay because we're kind of worrying about our screen, not worrying about our photo. So when we built the presets, we not only did it so we can adjust them with a slider, but you see all of our numbers are zeroed out. It's right back to neutral. So we can make quick adjustments without having to memorize any settings. So for this photo, DJ was a little sunburned during the session, so he's a little red.
I need to bring the reds down.
Yeah, so I'm just going to change the tint to go a little greener here, maybe make it a slight bit warmer. Exposure looks pretty good on this photo, and so, as is, I think this one looks pretty good. I will say, I wanted to just kind of add this, that as a photographer, my job is to shoot the best images I can, right? But as an editor, my job is to make those images look as good as I can. And I feel like that's important to recognize, but it's also important to recognize that as a business person, those two things go in complete opposite directions. Because as a photographer, I want to be out shooting and making great photos. And as an editor, I want to be in editing and making great photos. Well, one of those things makes me money, which is shooting, and the other one loses me money, which is editing. Because the only time we as photographers can earn an income is when we're out shooting. So if we can minimize our editing time, it becomes huge for us. Now, in our situation, we have Lindsay. Lindsay does a ton of our stuff for us, and we find that's a great setup for us because Lindsay can focus her energy on making these photos look great with, I don't want to say no regard for time because obviously we care a lot about her time and workflow, but she's not fighting a balance between am I shooting or am I editing. You know, she can kind of concentrate on making this perfect. So.
And
Okay.
you start to get an eye for it as you edit, and which can make it a lot quicker. And I also just kind of have a general, you know, thing where when I edit, I'm not trying to make it. I don't know how to describe it. I don't try to do too much to each photo because I also believe that, you know, you're capturing these moments. You want to make sure that they look as they did on the day, just like more enhanced.
Yeah.
Not like overly edited and everything. So that helps with the speed.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm just going to go through a few here that I think might be interesting. This one is a situation that we find ourselves in a lot. This was a completely cloudless day and maybe like 30 minutes, 20 minutes before sunset. So the sun is real strong, real orange, but we still have this kind of like deep, cool blue behind. And so, yeah, I can adjust the white balance down to make their skin look more normal, but then the rest of the scene looks unrealistic. And so that's one of the things we love about being able to dial the presets up and down is I can just slide it down a little bit. I get it down to like 75% or so. And without really changing the white balance, it looks a lot better. Again, DJ looks a little pink because he was sunburned, but you can get the point. So just with white balance and sliding that slider a little bit, it makes a big difference. Let me just show you. That's before and that's after. Let me go and just do a couple other ones from this session. And this is literally our speed here. So usually, like I said, we'll go straight from the top. We'll kind of do a crop if we need to. See if we want to dial the preset up or down at all. In this case, probably leave it right about there. And then see if we need to make any white balance or exposure adjustments. This one might be a little hot, so I'm going to bring it down a little bit. And once I do that, I think I can actually pump this preset a little harder. And so that's, look, you can see all the work the preset's doing here, before, after. And again, we've spent very little time on this. If I wanted to get picky, I would say, well, these highlights are blown a little bit over here, so I can still make these adjustments to my highlights if I want. But yeah. Lindsay, did you have a comment or something?
No, well, someone did have a question. Do you tend to select one preset for an entire event or session, regardless of the fact that the lighting changes from location to location?
Yeah, good question. I mentioned this earlier. I'm just going to keep editing as we go here. I mentioned this earlier, but we've always been a one preset family. So we have a look that we love, and we use it for everything. And when I say that, I want to be kind of clear that when we build our presets, we build them in a variety of situations. And the way we do it is we bring in photos from all sorts of weddings, all sorts of times of year, all sorts of light, and then we make a preset, and then we apply it to all of them. And then we look through and we say, okay, is there one thing we're changing a lot? So then we change it universally. No preset's going to be perfect, but it's going to get us as far as we can, and keeping the same look will keep it consistent. So
yeah, I think consistency is a very important.
Yeah. Let me just edit one or two more. I'm going to skip that because that's basically the same as before. I like this one here. It's just Brittany on the stairs, but you can see she kind of looks like a little orangey, maybe a little pink. So we'll just kind of bring this white balance down a little bit, and then here again, look at all the work the preset's doing. If I slide it down from 0, and if I go all the way up to 200, it's way too much. But I can go right around there. And if I find myself liking a preset, but I'm like, well, I'm always using it at 75%, I can literally just go over to San Diego, hit update with current settings. And what I would advise is you check all, and then you uncheck white balance, you uncheck exposure. Actually, yeah, anything that's specific to the actual photo, that kind of stuff. But you can update it if you're finding yourself doing the same thing. So just do a little crop on that. And so that's kind of our normal process. Let me do one more, and I want to jump over to the wedding. Cool. So you can see this one. It looks a little harsh. Not only is the color not quite right, because they look really orange, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of white balance off of them here. But it got real dark and a little too contrasty. So first thing I'm going to do is bump up the exposure to about where it should be. And then let me just play around here. And if I dial that preset back just a little bit, and maybe even tweak my highlights a little bit, that's a little better right there. So again, as few quick clicks as possible, keeping my mouse as close to the same area as possible makes a huge difference. And it, the photo obviously transformed with very few clicks there. That's the before, that's the after. Just a couple seconds of work. So I wanted to do a little composite work here, just because I think it could be kind of cool. So this photo is obviously underexposed. Did not do a great job with that one. I'm going to white balance off of his white shirt here, and I'm going to just bring the exposure up a little bit, and I'm going to dial this preset back just a little bit, maybe a little too contrasty. So I'm just going to make a few adjustments here. So what we did is we took two photos here, because we only had two of us and only had one light. So Amy's actually, I think I shot this one. Amy's holding the light over here, as you can see. And then in the next picture, we have Brittany lit up and Amy's holding the light over there. So we're just going to hit previous. So we have basically the same photo. I tried my best to stay still. I didn't do the best job in the world, but we have a pretty identical photo with light coming from two sides. So when we do images like this, what I'll do is just select them both, and I'm going to open them in Photoshop as layers. There's lots of stuff you can do with composites that make them fun, but you have to try your best to get the technique right. I would say if you're new to shooting composites, definitely shoot a safe shot first, because sometimes it's not going to line up right and it's not going to work. So never get too excited in front of your clients about your composite unless you know it's going to be right. Every once in a while you'll look stupid. All right. My computer's got a lot of stuff going on right now, so it's going to go a little slow. But so we shot this with the tilt shift lens here, and still working. Okay, so Photoshop pulled this up in two different layers. So you see there's a photo of DJ, photo of Brittany, and if we select them both, we can hit Edit, Auto Align Layers, and in theory, if we didn't screw this photo up too badly when we took it, which I know we didn't because I've done this photo before 2 years ago, Photoshop will sort of automatically align these together. In a second here, it's working. There we go. So now, when I hide this layer of DJ, you see that everything is pretty much the same, minus a few palm trees that are waving or something. So this becomes just a little masking job now. So I can select this layer, going to put a mask on it. And if you're not familiar with masking, I'm not going to teach you all about it now. This is a quick free workshop. You can Google that one. But I'm just going to mask out the light over here. I'm going to make a bigger brush, because even in the 2 seconds between shots here, it got it slightly darker. So my light's gone. And then I can also add a mask just around Brittany. And so that's going to reveal the photo underneath with the light on her. So we're just going to kind of mask her in, put some on his arm. And there's a little bit of a halo effect going on because, like I said, it got a little darker by the time we went from one person to the other. So it was, after sunset at that point. So I'm just going to make a big brush. Whoops. No, I'm not. I'm going to make a big brush and kind of fill that in. And then I'm going to go back and choose the opposite, mask out my light again. Photoshop's being a little slow because I'm streaming and photoshopping at the same time, but you can see how easy that is. That's pretty quick and dirty mask there. And so again, if I hide that layer, I can see what's underneath it. This is a great way to see if you screwed up. And it looks like I did a decent enough job. So normally I would just save that and bring that back into Lightroom as is, but there's a quick kind of fun composite for you. All right. Jump back into Lightroom. I want to just edit a few from a wedding, and then we'll jump into some of the user images that people sent. So, cool. So I applied the preset called Portland to this wedding when I imported it, if you remember. Portland's interesting. It's kind of like a hipstery looking preset. It's kind of fun. So, good for outdoorsy type stuff. So I'll just edit a few with this. You can see I exposed kind of for the highlights of this image, so nothing's really blown out, but it's a little on the darker side. So I'm just going to bring the exposure up a little bit, and the white balance is a little on the pink side.
Maybe someone had a question about white balance, actually.
Cool.
What do you do to set your white balance if there isn't a true white to select from?
I usually eyeball it, to be honest, because yeah, because make sure your monitor's calibrated, but white balance is so dependent on the kind of white that you're clicking on, because just in a wedding dress, the material can have two different colors of white in it, and it can drastically mess with you. Usually men's white shirts are a little on the blue side, and so like I'll show you actually in a second, and so that can mess with you. So a calibrated monitor and my eye is, for me, the most effective way. I think Lindsay might have froze here. She has some Zoom trouble sometimes, but I know Lindsay was going to mention that sometimes for her, when she is editing, if she's starting to feel that like crazy feeling where you're not sure if you're even looking at the right thing anymore, she'll go into grid mode in Lightroom and just kind of, oh, now you're seeing two of me, lucky you. She'll go into grid mode in Lightroom and just make sure that she's not too far off when she's comparing a bunch of different pictures together. So anyway, back into this photo here, we had made a few changes. And so I'm just gonna kind of slide this up and down, and you can see what a difference this preset makes. It gets more and more contrasty. If I go all the way back down, that's the original. And so we'll just kind of pick a little middle ground there. Cool. Just talking about the men's white shirt thing that I mentioned, and make sure Lindsay's probably going to be joining back in a second. So first thing I'm going to do is adjust this exposure so it looks right. So if I white balance off this shirt, that kind of gets a little warmer and a little greener than I want it to, because the shirts are usually a little on the blue side. So that might be a good starting position, but for us, there's usually an eyeball factor that goes into it. All right, Lindsay's joining back. And so with, again, with this preset, I can just dial it up or down. It's so much easier than messing with the settings down there. And so I like this one right near 100%. Let me kind of jump into a few here. Linz, I gave you an excuse. I told them your Zoom was broken. All right. So there's a couple images I wanted to pick out. So every once in a while, like we shot this a little on the brighter side and it came out a little bright and the white balance is a little off. But again, we're talking about just a few little settings here. So we're gonna do a white balance off her dress, see what that does. Bring the exposure down just a touch. Maybe switch our white balance here. and then just dial preset up and down to where we like it. So um, yeah, that's kind of the process. I don't want to overdo this here. Just trying to see if there's any other photos worth peeking at, but yeah, okay. Let's go. Let's actually just jump into a few photos that you guys sent in. Like I said, we had a bunch that sent in, and I I picked some that I thought I had something to say about as we edited. So I'm gonna get into a little more specific edits as we do. Some other like tips and things that we look out for as we're editing. Linz, feel free to chime in. I'm not
Yes.
100% sure. Okay, we're hearing you good. So I didn't actually write down who sent these in, so I'm sorry, but if you sent one in, thanks. Feel free to comment and claim it, especially if you like the photo. But these are all starting at 0. No presets have been applied to these, so we're kind of just scroll through and see what we like and go from there. So for this one, it looks like we got a little off-camera flash, kind of a harder light coming from over there. I'm going to do this DC one because it looks kind of crisp. First thing I'm going to do is adjust the crop. And part of this crop, one of my big pet peeves when I'm shooting and when I'm editing is photos that aren't quite in the center, but aren't quite a rule of thirds photo either. And so the decision I want to make here is to do one of those two things. I'm not going to leave it in this sort of half-centered thing because to me that just doesn't look right to the eye. And so I'm going to choose one or the other. Part of that decision process is what's most important here. So if I want to go for the rule of thirds, I'm cutting out the mountain on the left, which I think helps make the photo. And so for this photo, I would probably choose to go centered and to keep as much of the mountains as I can when I go centered. I also want to decide, am I going higher? Am I going lower? Does it make a difference? And so in this one, I think if I go higher, I still keep all of their reflection, but I get this kind of cool looking sky. So that's the crop I would go for. We put the DC preset on here, so I'm just going to dial this up and down a little bit, see what that does. I kind of like it normal. And then I'm going to change the white balance, make the sky a little bluer. This is one of those gray days that you kind of add some flash to and hope it fixes it, but it's hard to get too much color in the sky. So yeah, so I would probably go for kind of something like that. If we wanted to really get creative, sure, we could bump up these blues like crazy. Oops. We could go to a preset with more color, bump up these blues like crazy. But I think, we kind of need to decide if we want to go with the way the day looked or if we want to, go nuts with the preset. Either way, very easy to decide back and forth between the two. All right, this next one here, I just wanted to do because there's a blown highlight, but I also kind of like this with the suits here. I find that when you have like a monochromatic color in a lot of the photo, but there's a texture to it, black and white sings really well with that. So I'm just going to look through our 3 black and whites here, and just like the color ones with the black and whites, we can kind of dial up the intensity or dial it back down with our slider. So we'll keep that there. And on this one, the exposure and everything looks fine, but that phone's just a little blown out. And I'm guessing because they took this photo that the phone is important. So we'll just hit some highlights. One click and we're in pretty good shape with this. Let me dial this preset back up.
That's really good.
Yeah. All right.
Someone was asking how you choose your black and whites, and this is perfect for that.
Yeah, so we have 3 different black and whites over here. We have like a soft, a medium, and then like a hard kind of grungy one. And with this slider, honestly, it makes it so much easier. There's like a little less decision making because you can like take any of them and dial up the intensity. It's great. So
yeah, that's like the biggest time saver. I feel like I used to toggle between like 6 different black and whites I've sort of collected over the years, and now I just have to use the slider.
Yeah. Now, I know no one signed up for an image critique, but I'm just going to mention one of the issues that makes this image difficult is that the person didn't use gels on their flashes, or if they did, they didn't get it orange enough to match the room. So you see the shadow like on her dress and stuff. That's from the room light, where the flashes aren't hitting, and so that's why we have a dress that's half orange. So if we white balance off her dress, the rest of it becomes blue. If we white balance off this part of her dress, it kind of looks like it was at a shot. It's pretty orange looking. And so if we want to keep that in color, I'm going to try to find a preset that kind of minimizes the color differences in there. There's a few different options, but more than likely we're going to try to fix this when we shoot. And if we can't, this would probably be another good black and white candidate, because that kind of neutralizes that color difference. And there we can, again, dial it up, down. On this one, again, I'm going to put this in the center because we didn't quite hit center. So that's going to be one of my goals. Maybe straighten that a tiny bit. And then what I find is when I have a dancing shot like this, where all my light and my focus, there's not really anything else in this shot that's important. Some of these lights in the background look kind of cool, but there's nothing like that screams importance. This is just about the couple. So yeah, we'll throw a little vignette on there. We have some vignette shortcuts that we use, but that really draws your attention right to them. It's not so dark that it makes it look like ugly or old, but it's effective. So keep jumping through. Someone sent this cutie of their dog. This is a really tough situation because we have a black dog in a contrasty area. And so we're going to look for a preset that kind of brings up some shadows, maybe knocks out some contrast if we can. So just kind of scroll through here. I kind of liked maybe, yeah, let's go with this one here. Let's go with Denver. So with that, I'm going to bring this exposure back down. And this is where I'll use a brush. And I'm just going to grab a brush. I'm going to paint this on the doggy, some of the dark areas of my dog, not my dog, of this dog. And we're just going to add a little clarity, maybe not even that much, a little exposure, little shadows, and so we can see the dog. Now, we have this, but to me it looks a little HDR-like, maybe a little unrealistic, and so, again, here on the preset, we can just dial it up, we can dial it down, so we'll just dial it down just a little bit, and so now we have a cool effect. There's the before, there's the after, very natural looking still, but just has a little style, adds some nice detail around the dog.
Yeah, it looks really good. It's always good to toggle between the before and after of a photo to see how much you've done to it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, see if you've gone to the extreme, if your eyes are going nuts and you've been editing for an hour.
Seriously, once you're like editing thousands of photos, you kind of lose track if like things have gotten too warm, cold, contrasty.
I chose this photo because I like this kind of sunset moment that this person captured. And so I had mentioned how we tried to name our presets here after the looks that we thought represented the city. So if you click on Atlanta, it kind of has like a little warm glow. San Diego does kind of the same. Key West really kind of brightens everything. And so those are good options here. I'm going to click on Key West. You can see his leg and stuff went a little pink. So we'll just go back a little on the green side, but I like this image, nice and warm. It looks sunsetty. And so just with the single preset there, we're in pretty good shape already. I'm just gonna dial this up and down to right where I want it. Yeah, that looks pretty good as is. I like that. There was, I'll wait for that tip later. Okay, this next photo, again, a really tough situation. Just as a photography tip, again, I know a lot of people go shade, 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 let's get people in shade. But one thing I advise to be careful of is not having crazy bright things behind a shaded subject. That can be tricky. So we have an underexposed couple here. So the first thing we'll do, we'll bring the exposure up a little bit. I would also probably crop this in a little bit just to get rid of some of this stuff that doesn't matter as much. We're going to cut her dress off a little, unfortunately, if we do that, but maybe we'll go right about there. So now we're able to make out the couple a little better, but let's kind of look for some of these. Some of these presets are built for people that like kind of a little lighter, like airier style. DC is a good example of that. I'll show you that in a second when we get to some columns, but You can see we can kind of just put the intensity of that down a little bit, and we kind of have that more airy look. So this is a before, that's an after, which is probably our best option with a really bright background like that. All right, we have 15 images to go through. We're halfway. So this was a really underexposed photo. It happens to the best of us. It's okay. So first things first, let's just bring this exposure up a little bit. We can keep it kind of moody and dark looking. That's fine, but at least we can see them now. So let's just scroll through. The black and whites look kind of nice on this, but let's see. So I like Portland, but it does make it real dark. So we're just going to dial that preset down just a little bit. We can bring our exposure up just a little more. This would be another good situation for a brush, just to kind of add a little bit of shadow detail and a little bit of exposure on them. So we'll do that and maybe warm it up just a little bit. So something like that can look pretty good and easy. Okay, there's a few others. I may just skip to some things I had something to say about. Let's do 4 or 5 more. So this photo, first things first, if we're taking a landscape, we always want to make sure our horizon lines are straight. This is pretty good. And then we're going to kind of go through these. This kind of looks like Key West, so my initial instinct is just to go there. So let's just roll with that. And I'm going to dial this up just a little bit, bring out some of the detail in the building and everything. Our wood is looking a little pink, and so I'm going to bring that back and add a little warmth to it so it kind of looks like sunset. Just play with the white balance here. That looks pretty cool. We have this little preset we call unvignette, which basically takes the natural like camera lens vignetting away. So that's pretty cool.
That's really good.
Yeah. One thing I want to do with this photo, so a lot of people, if they ever want to like intensify a sky, they'll go and they'll make a brush and kind of brush around, and then they'll decrease the exposure, and they'll do something like this. But the problem is, as you can see, we get this halo around the building. And so then we have to like go in and we're erasing and doing all this work, and it's annoying and it never looks quite right. So a trick that we use for that is over here in the navigator, you can zoom out and look at this from far away. And we will make this really big brush that kind of covers the whole photo. We're going to take the feathering all the way down to 0, and we're going to turn this auto mask on. If you haven't used auto mask before, it basically, when you click on it, it chooses an area that is the same looking area. So you can see here, I clicked O so you can see, but it actually pretty much masked out the sky all the way on its own. It did add a little bit of red down in here, but it does a really good job. So now, just with one brush and using auto mask, look at this. Look at all I can do with the sky. So if I want to make the sky just a little darker, maybe a little bluer, maybe a little pinker, I can do all that. Sorry, let me zoom back in for you. I can do all that, and I'm just affecting the sky without affecting the building at all. It's a really, really cool feature of Lightroom that not a lot of people know about. So if I want to just toggle this off to see what I did, look at the difference in the sky just from that, and you can see it doesn't really affect my building at all. It's a really, really cool feature of Lightroom that we use a lot if we want to affect the sky, or if I'm doing a commercial job and I need my white areas to be whiter, things like that. Okay. This is a cool photo. Whoever took this, good job. I like this one.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, I'd like to be here right now. So this is actually a scenario where I'm going to crop this into a panoramic, because as I'm looking at this, I love this, all this stuff they're overlooking. It's cropped beautifully, but there's like maybe let's call it an inch of space above the mountains, and I want about the same amount of space below them for balance. I don't need all of this. It actually probably, in my opinion, tells a better story without all that stuff on the bottom, because I don't want to see how they got there. I just want to see that they're up there. And so I'm going to crop that into like a 16 by 9. Let's just look through our presets here. I like something soft. Denver's cool.
Oh my god, I love when pictures can handle all of the
yeah. This is great. I like San Diego. I just found as we've been developing these that it's so funny how when the presets that like it seems to fit the area based on the title. um, so we'll see. Let's go real warm with this and kind of overdo it a little bit, but something like that looks cool. Again, here I need to start deciding. Let me turn my auto mask on. I need to start deciding how much detail I want. So I could paint this dark area down here and kind of dodge and burn and decide do I want to add some clarity and let the hill show a little bit? Do I want to do the opposite and really darken it so it's like a strip of light? I tend to like that when it's a little darker. The other thing we could do is we could add a little gradient on here and kind of mess with this dehaze tool because it's a hazy day. We could make it hazier, more dreamy. We could take some of that haze away if we want. So a couple cool options here. You don't really need to do much though. It's a great photo. Good job whoever took this one. All right.
Is there a request to edit the beach photo?
This one here, I guess.
I don't know.
Cool. Okay. I just hit an hour. I was trying to get out under an hour. We'll be done in a second.
That's my fault. I came in with that last minute question.
No.
I wanted you to fail.
No, there's another one that I definitely want to edit because there's a few things I have to say. So again, when we have a distinct horizon line, we're always going to make sure that's straight unless we have a specific reason not to. So first couple tweaks here, we'll adjust our white balance a little bit, adjust our exposure and our horizon a little bit, and then if we had a preset already picked out, we would have already applied it, but let's just kind of look through here and see what we like. We have some different options. I kind of like the first one. I kind of like the Sedona for that. Kind of brings out the pinks that were in the sky. And I would probably leave this one a little on the pink side if it were me, because that's kind of what the sky looked like. I'm a big believer that the skin of our subjects doesn't always have to look like skin does on a bright day in natural light, because when you took this photo, whoever took it, and you had a pink sky, most likely the people looked a little pink as well. That's what the world looked like right then. So we'll do that. Might add a little contrast, but you can see we don't really need to touch the sliders a whole lot anymore. It's great. All right, one last one. I'm sorry if I missed your photo, but just want to not go crazy here. So, all right. You can see this person took this photo, didn't add any light or anything, so they were in a place, obviously, where they had a big open light source at the top coming down. They have a couple in here in the middle, but it's really hard to see because if they went any brighter, it would have blown out the top. But they have a couple here. So let's first straighten this out just a little bit. And you can see because they shot with a wide angle, we actually can't get it perfectly straight. So our line right up here is a little crooked, while our line right behind the couple is straight. So we're just going to use that one, oops, I'm on mine before. We're going to use that one feature here where, see, this is why scrolling stinks, because every time you do it, you got to go down and find stuff. But I'm just going to click on this upright tool, and I clicked on full. That didn't quite do it. Let's try vertical. It's a little better. I'm just trying to get something that looks a little more straight. I think vertical was my best shot. So now let's see if we can recrop this at all. When you're shooting wide angles of buildings, you got to be real careful with your lines, because that can make or break a photo, and it is important that you get it right. So, okay. So for this one, what I'm going to do is try to find a preset that kind of knocks my highlights down and brings my shadows up a little bit so that I can not lose too much detail. So something like this, I had mentioned the DC preset tends to work pretty well for like structures, columns, things like that, which we named it that because there's a lot of that in DC. So I'm going to use that preset. I'm going to dial this up a little bit, and you can see it already did a pretty good job. We didn't lose any highlights up here, but we can see a lot more detail on our people. And so let me just crop in on them just a little bit. And then if I was editing this photo, I would put a brush here I'm not going to fake any light behind them, I don't think, but I'm going to add some clarity. Am I? No, maybe not. Maybe some texture. And then I'm probably just going to try to boost my shadows and my exposure just a little bit. So I really want to try to make these people pop in a subtle way without too much of a halo. So let me just make this brush bigger. And we're going to try to spread this out a little bit so it can look like a very natural light source. I'm not going to try to paint them in exactly because there's almost no chance I could do that. But if I just add a pretty natural soft light, it looks like it's coming from the direction the light already was. And we have a real nice natural vignette. So look at this, before, after. It's a pretty big difference on that one. So,
Yeah, looks really good.
okay, cool. I think that will do it for now. There's obviously a lot more to editing and workflow, but we wanted to give you some of our kind of speed tips and go through our process, show you some of our pro presets and how they work. If you're interested in them, the website has been there up there the whole time, hofferphotography.com/presets. You can take a look at all the pro presets and the cool little slider function that we designed for them. So, Lindsay, anything else you want to add?
No.
All right. Awesome. You can check out our work at Hoffer Photography on Facebook, Instagram, hofferphotography.com. Thanks for joining us. I hope you guys are all staying safe and healthy. We love you all for following us. Thank you. Have a great week. See ya. I haven't ended the stream. There we go.
Uh-oh.